Welcome to Dock Chat, the podcast that brings you the stories of the unique community of people who work, live and play in the Historic Dockyard Chatham. In this episode, we hear from Alex Wade, who is the Conservator at the Dockyard. In this part, Alex tells us about her family connections to the Dockyard and her career as a Conservator.
I was first introduced to the Dockyard in the 1990s. I may have been about sort of 10 years old, but I was brought here for a school visit. I've always lived in this area, so in the Hempstead-Gillingham area, and I went to Bredhurst C.V. Primary School, and they did us a nice day out. And I remember really vividly going on to Ocelot and going around and having the tour on there, and then heading up to the ropery and making a piece of rope, which I think we still got at home somewhere, floating around. So that was the first introduction to the site, and it's been a staple in my life ever since, really, and throughout my family life, especially down my maternal side. So my great-grandmother was here just in the pre-war period. We think she was in the spinning rooms, not 100% sure where she was, but before that we had a 4 times great-grandfather called Cornelius Bryant, great name, who was foreman of rope makers. He died in 1891, and we think from his obituary he was quite well thought of, and he did a great job here in the ropery. But we're not 100% sure what he did, so I'm hoping that we can find a bit more information out about him as I sort of go through the years here and feed the back to the family. But I've come to sort of be here after a career in conservation that sort of spanned maybe almost the last 10 years, which is crazy to say. I sort of sometimes think of myself as early career, but I'm quite very much mid-career now. So when I started doing my training, I sort of took a different pathway into conservation. Most people will do an undergraduate of some description, maybe an English literature, a history, or a science even, sometimes as an undergraduate. And then they'll move into a master's programme. So that might be, you'll specialise down into sort of different elements of conservation, but you might choose a book or a paper conservation course or an art on paper course or something along those lines. I'd finished university, I'd come out of my undergraduate with an English literature degree and thought, well, what am I going to do with this? That's not teaching or something like that. But I'd done a little module in archives right at the very end of my course. And at the University of Reading, where I went to, they had a museum and an archive set up, able to get some hands-on experience. I absolutely loved it, and I thought it was magical to have hands-on sort of experience with all the material and things like that, and be able to sort of just go and pick something off the shelf at will and rifle through it. But I had no idea how to get into this field. But Maidstone Kent History and Library Centre, that's the archive repository there for the whole of Kent, were offering a 18-month placement where you could train under a conservator. It was connected with the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. So I'd have an assessor come down roughly sort of every 3 months, every quarter or so, and have a look through this portfolio of work that I was putting together. I got paid a wage to do it, which was incredible, really unusual. So I covered a wide range of topics there, from sort of exhibition installation to treatment work and things like that, and then moved on from that place to the Lambeth Palace Library, the Archbishop's collection. Initially I started there on a really, really lovely project to clean, package and look after their early manuscript series. So that was sort of a huge collection of really, really early volumes, mainly obviously church religious based volumes, but there are a couple of other things in there. And I believe it contained works from Henry VIII's library. So seeing all of that and sort of the beautiful sort of manuscripts put together were really fantastic. And then there was some sort of other projects sort of involved. Mainly, a lot of it was working with sort of this piece of equipment called a box making machine, which, does what it says on the tin. It makes all these lovely boxes that we see here, which are really particular for conservation. You can't just buy a box off the shelf from sort of the post office and put your collections in that. The pieces that we're using here are made out of a really special cardboard. They're sort of a grey buff liner, but inside they've got a calcium bicarbonate layer, which stops materials breaking down inside the box. It sort of slows that degradation down. To buy them in was majorly expensive, so this institution at Lambeth let me work on the box machine, gave me the training to do it, which was a really niche skill that I didn't appreciate at the time, but that allowed me then to move on to the London Archives, who'd got one of these machines and was looking for someone to do preventive work, preventive work sort of looks after our collection's health, as it were. So if you sort of think about a hospital environment, you'd look for a triage department first, and that would be a preventive conservator. So they're looking at everything that comes in, making sure it's got no mould, pests, anything that can spread out into other collections. And then further from that, you're looking after the health of the entire thing. So I'll look at environments, the temperature and the humidity. We'll look at how things are packaged and stored, what the sort of furniture of the store looks like, so the shelving and things, what kind of materials they're made out of, all designed to extend the life of the collection as a whole. So that's what I was doing at the London Archives, and I was there for about 6 years, looking after 30 stores, which across 2 sites, which was a massive repository. And obviously being an archive, it was hugely book and paper based and weighted towards that kind of material. But it collects everything for a square mile of London, covers Lord Mayor's offices and stuff like that as well. So you got to see a huge, great array of stuff. We did have an original, one of the Magna Cartas we got to work with. One of Shakespeare's first folios, which was annotated by Keats, was a really nice piece. So then after that, this position came up, and I'd sort of been looking at this place for a little while because it's so close to where I live, and it's obviously it's got such sort of family connections with me. And like I said, remember it very vividly from my childhood. And I thought, oh, what a lovely place to work. And it's got such a huge range of collections that are quite unusual. So obviously being a sort of military leaning collection, there's a lot of things in here that you won't necessarily find in other people's collections, and it would really sort of stretch and expand my experience of, you know, what I was doing. And I really like the idea of moving back into museums as well. There's just something so nice about museums and being able to bring things to the public in really big exhibition spaces. Whereas archives, people are coming to you for a very specific purpose. This museum environment really appealed to me. I've been here since January, so really quite new still, so only sort of 7 months in. But we've done a lot in that 7 months. I've seen a lot, learned a hell of a lot as well, and made some really lovely friends and connections as well.
We will hear more from Alex later. To find out more about visiting the dockyard, go to the website, which is easily accessible by typing Historic Dockyard Chatham in your browser, or if you want the website address, it is thedockyard.co.uk. That is thedockyard.co.uk. You will be able to buy tickets online, and the great thing is the cost of a ticket gives you access to the dockyard for a year. Please note the dockyard closes to the public on the 16th of November 2025, apart from special, separately ticketed events. Brickwrecks, Sunken Ships in Lego Bricks is making its UK debut at the dockyard and is located in number 1 Smithery. The exhibition is open daily and due to overwhelming visitor demand has been extended to the 16th of November, and more information is available on the dockyard website. The Salute to the 40s Festival will return to the Historic Dockyard for one final time on the 20th and 21st of September in a powerful celebration to coincide with the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. For nearly 2 decades, this popular festival has brought the sights, sounds and spirit of the 1940s to life. In 2025, it will bow out in true style and will be bigger and bolder than ever before. The finale will give you a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to honour the wartime generation, celebrating the resilience, camaraderie and spirit that defines the era. And more information is available on the Dockyard website. In this part, Alex tells us more about her role as a conservator and talks about some of the interesting projects she is involved with at the Dockyard.
So there's several sort of different ways that we think about conservation and then restoration. A lot of people don't really know the difference between the two, but there is a bit of a marked difference between the two different disciplines. Conservation, which is obviously what I'm doing here and sort of what I'm trained to do, is predominantly for the stabilisation of materials. So you're trying to slow down or stop the deterioration of an item. It's about preservation and also access for people as well. So if you're thinking about, say you had a section of sheets of paper and it had sort of broken down at the spine or something like that in the book, you still want people to be able to access and read that information, but they have to do it safely so that they're not damaging the piece further. So we might go in and make a couple of little repairs, but maintaining the overall look and feel of the piece. You might not necessarily match colours of the papers. If you sort of repaired a little corner of a piece, you might not necessarily make that the same colour as the original page. It kind of makes it look It's obvious that it's had a repair to it, and it's all reversible as well. A lot of the materials and methods that we use are reversible. You can take them off again. So that, say that in a few sort of 10 years, 20 years, we decide we don't actually want that piece on anymore, or if it's deteriorating the item, we can take that off and remove it. Whereas restoration is a bit more like what you might see on the repair shop on BBC One. That's all about really reconstruction of a piece and the aesthetic appearance of something. So say you had a nice big oil painting and it had a piece that was missing somewhere, or a piece where some of the paint layers had come off, the restorer might go in and paint those back in, making an estimate of what the artist would have possibly put on the piece, what it would have looked like when it was originally sort of painted and put in. They might take the frame off. If the frame is damaged, they might want to rebuild that frame and sort of take pieces away they would get rid of, whereas in conservation we might not necessarily take pieces off and get rid of them. We might keep them sort of as part of the collection attached to the piece, and we're sort of more concerned with the historical, what we call provenance of the piece. That's the story of the item. We're more concerned with that. But there is crossover between the two. So I will also do sort of what some people might consider a bit of restoration work. I might do a bit of that with conservation, especially if it's going out for exhibition and display. But there is a code of ethics that we stick to that is passed down by people called the Institute of Conservation. They sort of oversee all of us as a professional body, and there are British standards that we adhere to as well, and every country's got maybe slightly different standards that it sticks to, but the general principles are sort of the same, and that's to keep everybody sort of looking after things in sort of the same way. We're all kind of moving towards the same goal, and that's sort of part of what I'm here to do, is provide some of that advice and guidance as an institution about what's ethical, what we should be doing with materials, how we should be repairing them, how far to go, those kind of questions. I sort of give a bit of that information to the trust as a whole. We're really unusual that we've got an element called working heritage here, which is not something I'd ever really come across before in another sort of setting, but working heritage for us is things like the equipment in the ropery. So it's part of our historic fabric. It is, some of that equipment is like a heritage collections item within itself, but we still need it to be able to showcase rope making and some of the skills as part of some of our demonstrations. And obviously we have income generation off the back of it. So the way we treat those items are slightly different to what we might treat a piece in the store to be, because it has to be functional. So we're also looking at using conservation practices, preserving and keeping the piece, but with the awareness that it is continually in use, it's continually breaking down throughout the years that we're maintaining it. And if we keep that goal in mind, then we might change a few of our practices to sort of keep the working heritage going. There's different disciplines to conservation as well. People always ask me, sort of, what should I specialise in? You could specialise in anything, really. There's two distinct categories. So there's preservation conservation, which is my specialty. So like we talked about before, that's looking after stores and the general health of a collection. Interventive is again more like what you might see on those shows like Repair Shop and some of the behind the scenes at the V&A programs. So they're people that are physically putting items back together and repairing them. And from there you can specialise even further. So you can really niche down into really specific materials. So there's plastics, there's obviously books and paper, textiles, ceramics, all sorts of things that you can specialise down into. Because I'm the only conservator here, really coming in with that preservation background to look at the whole collection, and then also doing a little bit of interventive work sort of here and there to keep some of our projects and things on track. Speaking of projects, we've had some really nice ones recently. Obviously, I've only been here for 7 months, so some of this work is still in progress. But if you were to pop along to the Treasures Gallery, you would see a completed piece of conservation work in the View of Chatham painting by Richard Reinagle. That wasn't done by myself. That was sent off to one of our colleagues and peers in preservation and conservation, Francis Downing, and he's done a lovely job on that. And you'll be able to see sort of the new gilding that he's put around the piece, the way he stabilised the frame. He's also had a look at the varnish, so the varnish layers that were discolouring were removed, and he put a acrylic perspex piece of glazing across the front of the piece to keep it safe within the gallery. So that's a little bit of an example of something that's already up. Obviously, the previous Doc Chat podcast was on the Commissioner's House, and that's all over our social media at the minute, so you might be familiar with it. From the conservation end, we've been looking at all of the lovely finds that Nigel has been bringing out of the house. There's obviously our really exciting playing card, which I think you can read a bit about in our blog post. That's a a piece that was brought up from underneath the floor in the ground floor, I believe, and we've now dated it with the Worshipful Company of Playing Card Makers to 1725 to 1750. But we found all sorts of stuff, from newspaper cuttings to people's books, little notes that people have left across the site, some people's lunch matter. So there's some glass bottles of Coke, some beer cans as well, an awful lot of cigarette packets from sort of the gentlemen that worked in the building from their lunch breaks. They sort of maybe just dropped them down the side of the walls or under the floor while they were in there. So yeah, we're looking at all of those. We're doing a big job to clean them. They'll be catalogued as part of our collection. And then there should be, hopefully, a little display going up at some point. Hopefully, particularly some of the wallpaper samples we've brought off. We've got about 20 of those now from different ranges. And some of them are really gorgeous. There's a lot of floral pieces in particular, but there's a piece that I'm quite interested in, which seems to have depictions of people underneath as well, which I think might be roughly Victorian period. So I can't wait to see that. But they're stuck together in a bundle of 4. So when they came in and redecorated the house, Nigel feels like it was probably decorated roughly every 20 years when they had a new commissioner in. And the guys would just slap a new layer on and slap another layer on, and then they'd paint over that and then put another one on. So we've now got the job in the lab of trying to separate some of these layers so that we can see sort of the different designs underneath. And we'll also be looking at the ceiling painting, the famous ceiling painting, which I think is on the 2nd floor. That's from the cabin of the Royal Sovereign, and we think it was installed in the cabin in 1701. I'm not entirely sure when it ended up in the house, but that piece has been in situ for a very long time. It was taken off, we think, in the 1940s, and some work was done on it, and then it was put back later on. There is a signature on the underside of somebody that did that work in the 40s, so I think that's gone to our researchers, and they'll be trying to figure out who that gentleman was who helped put it back. But moving forward, we'll be having somebody come in to work on it. They'll have to work on scaffolding, not directly underneath it. We won't be taking it down from the ceiling. We'll need to give it a really good clean. It is quite dirty in some areas, obviously, where it's been in situ for a long time. And there is quite a lot of hands that we think have been involved in it over the years. So there's something that can happen to a painting called overpainting, which is obviously people just try to build in those areas. Like we talked about with restoration, they're trying to recolour some of the areas back in or sort of repair damage, and sometimes that after a while you get loads of different layers of paint on top of it. It looks a bit strange, and some of those paints start to discolour, and it's not the original piece as it was. So we will be taking some of that overpaint off very carefully. We're thinking about using something called an XRF scanner, which will show you the different layers. So you might have seen on some of the other historical programmes, they can scan a painting and you might see an area that was painted over by the artist. So we can do that kind of analysis to see if there's anything underneath that's worth re-exposing again. And the varnish layer will go as well as part of that process. That's discolouring and breaking down in different areas. And then it will be stabilised. The conservator will repaint some areas as he feels that it's needed, and hopefully it will brighten the piece right up, and it will look lovely when it's done. And then we'll be putting a varnish layer over the top to protect it in the future from other deterioration. And it's the same for the frame, really. It's removing dust and dirt and debris. I think there might be quite a stubborn varnish layer that someone's put on it at some time, which we might have to do a bit of experimentation to try and get that off. But once it's done, it should be a really stunning piece. And it might look slightly different to what it is now. We're kind of hoping that there might be some elements that have been covered up in the past that we might be able to, if not bring back to life, at least have the scans of that we can show visitors and the general public. So some of the hidden elements that are underneath. And you might have seen our time capsule as well. I think that's going into the house. We're doing a little call out. We're asking for people to do a design of the dockyard as they think it might look like in a few years or in the past, how it resonates to them based off of the playing card we found. So we're leaving a bit of something behind for somebody else to find, just like we found all these lovely finds under the floor. Also looking at the side traveller. If you've been to the ropery recently, you might see the side traveller going up and down, turning the rope and helping to keep the rope taut and tight when it's in production. That's got a cog that's deteriorated over time, over use. Like we talked about that working heritage, it's always breaking down throughout the usage, and we need to get in to repair it. I believe it's a Victorian piece of equipment, and it's never been taken apart in all the years that it's been here and it's been in use. So this is completely new for us. It's completely new for anybody, really. So there's no sketches for it. There's no designs for it. Everything would have been hand machined and handmade. So we can't just go to Wix and buy a new piece and stick that in. So we'll be undertaking a big project to take the whole thing apart. We'll be 3D scanning every element so that we've got a database of all the pieces that are in it. So that's for now as an interest to how it went together, but also in the future, if more pieces break down, we've got that scan that we can send off and get a new piece made. It's going to take an awful lot of undertaking, a lot of very particular numbering, because you will have to work out which nuts and bolts went into which holes and which arms were which piece. So it will all need numbering, organising, photographing, cleaning down. The new piece will be sent off with the right dimensions, and that will be produced by one of our off-site partners. And then we think it might have to be filed down to get a very, very exact sort of that handmade finish to it, so that it all fits in with all the cogs that are in there. And then it will have to go back together again. Hopefully when it all goes back, it all works the same way it did before. If you keep an eye out on all of our social media and our website, there'll be updates about both of those projects going out really soon, and we'll keep you informed about what's happening with both of those. And probably the biggest thing we're doing for the collections team is the new store project. That kind of really what I was brought on for, and it's sort of the bread and butter of what we'll be doing the next few years. Because we have a huge collection here of almost anything you could think of, really. So there's archaeological collections that we've obviously found around site, that when people have been digging, they've brought things up. There's textiles and clothing that has been donated to us. Books, papers, there's some life rings in here, and ceramics and pieces that were on the ships. And all of that currently is stored in a different store, which is a basement area, which is not the best for our collections to live in. There's a few contaminants and things floating around. The collection itself is quite interesting because it has various hazards attached to it, as you would expect for a military collection. It's got sort of radiation, and asbestos was quite widely used. So what we want to do is pull all of that out of the area that's in, and that's going to move into the new store, which is where we're sitting now, when we're looking at all of our lovely collections that have already started to populate the space in here. So we've made a brand new store. Everything when it comes out will have to be cleaned, carefully catalogued, because some of it is bit mystery boxes as well, which is really exciting. So it's stuff that we might not know that we had. So opening every box is a bit of a new surprise, especially for me, because I've not seen this collection before. And then it will be processed, made safe as well. So if there is anything that is a bit hazardous to human health, we will secure that as well, and very particular kinds of packaging. And then hopefully, once we've got a good grip on the material that we've got, and we've got it all laid out nicely in the new store, we can get some new exciting pieces out on display, and we can get some new pieces to refresh some of our galleries, and you'll see a bit more of this lovely collection going out. But this one in particular is a really long-standing project, so this is going to go on for years. We've got a huge amount of material, and we're always adding to it as well, so there's always new intakes. Obviously, Commissioner's House has yielded a huge amount of new finds. It's really important work to be undertaking, because we've got all this history and heritage. All of these collections add to not just the story of the dockyard as a whole, but all of our individuals that worked here from sort of creation all the way up. There's so many hands involved in this collection, so many different stories and unique elements to it. And people's family history is obviously here. There's a huge call for family history on this site. So looking after it is not a small undertaking. It's a mass of material with a lot of different challenges and a lot of different specialisms. But conservation is really at the core of everything that we're trying to do. And the preservation element to it is so important to keep that history alive and maintained for all of our future generations. Hopefully for the next several hundred years, we'll keep it going.
We are now on 10 podcast platforms, including Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. You can either visit any of the 10 podcast platform websites or download their free apps from the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. If you have enjoyed our podcast, please hit the subscribe button and you will be sent a notification whenever a new episode is added. To contact us about the podcasts, please email us at podcast@chdt.org.uk. That's podcast@chdt.org.uk. So until the next time, this is John saying goodbye and take care.